I remember the exact moment my life ended. Not in the dramatic, heart-stopping, breathless way some people describe it. Mine ended with a smile. His smile. Ethan stood beside me at our engagement party, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by hundreds of flashing cameras and industry giants. I was wearing the dress I designed myself, ivory silk, tailored to perfection, stitched with love and ambition. And when the crowd raised their glasses to toast our future, he turned to me and said, just loud enough for the microphones to catch, "I can't marry someone who only wanted me for my name." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. At first, I thought it was a joke. That maybe, just maybe, he had something else planned. But then he walked away. Just walked. My knees buckled. My vision blurred. But the cameras kept rolling. I became headline gold. Gold digger designer dumped at her own party. Tycoon's son exposes social climber fiance. They all ran with it. Every outlet. Every screen. Every platform. My designs were pulled from boutiques. My social media accounts were flooded with hate. Clients cancelled. Friends disappeared. My family, what little I had, told me to lay low. So I did. I packed 2 suitcases, took what was left of my savings, and left the city that watched me burn. I didn't cry on the plane. I didn't scream or curse or drown in wine like a broken character from a cheap soap opera. I just sat there and planned. For 6 hours and 22 minutes, I stared out the window and rewrote my life. In Paris, I became someone else. I dyed my hair darker. Got rid of the last name people used like a curse. And I started over, selling sketches on the street, stitching dresses for dancers, hand-beating gowns at night just to pay rent. It was quiet. Humbling. But every time I pricked my finger with a needle or got ghosted by another client who thought new designer meant free labor, I remembered the sound of Ethan's voice. The smile he wore when he crushed me. And it kept me going. One night, while rushing to deliver a garment to a temperamental actress, I tripped and tore the entire hem. I sat on the floor of a dirty alley, crying for the first time since that party. That's when someone found me. Her name was Claudine Moreau. A retired editor for one of the top French fashion magazines. She was passing by, saw the ruined gown, and asked who designed it. I expected mockery. But she looked at it the way I used to look at my own work, like it meant something. Claudine became my mentor. My secret weapon. She gave me 1 year. Said if I didn't make something of myself in that time, I had to promise I'd do something stable like tailoring for rich brides. Challenge accepted. I renamed myself Mira Lane. Lane, because I felt like I was paving my own. Mira, because it was close enough to my old name that it still felt like me, but new. Stronger. I started uploading my work anonymously, no face, no backstory, just designs. Clean lines. Fierce cuts. No frills. Just sharp, deliberate power. Fashion for women who'd been silenced, humiliated, underestimated. It caught on. A stylist for a rising pop star DM'd me. Then a model. Then a producer. And just like that, the brand Lane was born. People assumed I was some new Parisian talent with rich investors. Let them. I didn't correct them. I just worked. Harder than I ever had. By the time I showed my face in a photo shoot, it didn't matter what I used to look like. My cheekbones were sharper, my expression colder, my posture unshakable. People saw confidence and called it beauty. The city that destroyed me had moved on. But I hadn't. I watched Ethan's name rise in the business world. He wasn't a full tycoon yet, but he was trying. Desperate for legacy. And I knew something he didn't. He was a terrible strategist. Brilliant at PR, yes. Charming when he wanted to be. But blind to subtlety. And allergic to patience. So when the invitation arrived, Fashion Week, New York, headline slot open, I said yes. I would return not as the girl who got dumped, but as the woman who built an empire from the ashes of a dress. The press doesn't know yet. The city doesn't remember. But they will. And when Ethan sees me again, I want him to wonder if I'm real. If it's possible. If the woman in front of him is the same girl he discarded in front of the world. And I want him to realize, far too late, that I never needed him. But he, somewhere deep down, will always need me. I'm Mira Lane now. And I own the runway. The plane touched down at JFK just after sunrise. I wore oversized sunglasses, a tailored black coat from my own line, and silence like armor. No paparazzi waited. No flashing bulbs. Just the quiet hum of wheels and voices and luggage carts. It was perfect. Because when you've been publicly humiliated once, you learn the value of quiet entrances. Let them underestimate me again. Let them think Mira Lane is just another European designer with sharp tailoring and a lucky streak. They'll learn soon enough. Fashion Week was 5 days away. My team had already landed and set up the studio space we rented in a converted Soho loft. I'd hired them all personally. Every one of them an outsider like me. People with vision, grit, and something to prove. We worked out of that loft like a well-oiled machine. No wasted words. No excuses. Just creation. My new collection was called Ashes. 20 looks. All black, white, and blood red. Every stitch a statement. Every hem a memory. I didn't name the pieces publicly, but I had my own labels for each one. The fiancé, the fall, the headlines, the flight. And the final gown. Deep crimson silk, cut like a knife, trained like a shadow, I called that one the resurrection. It was meant for me. Only me. I hadn't planned to walk the runway. Designers rarely did. But this wasn't just fashion. This was my return. My reckoning. The city buzzed with speculation. Lane had never shown in New York before. Some said I was scared of the American market. Others claimed I was too artsy to compete with the commercial giants. Good. Let them talk. Let them guess. Meanwhile, I moved like a ghost through the city that once crushed me. I visited old haunts under new names. The cafe where Ethan and I used to meet before his meetings? I bought the building 2 months ago. My lawyers handled it through a shell company. It'll become a flagship boutique next year. The restaurant where he ended things? I reserved a private room there for an industry mixer next week. And the penthouse apartment we once looked at together, the one he said would be ours someday? I closed on it last week. In cash. He doesn't know yet. He will. On day 3, the press started catching on. Mira Lane's first US show to open Fashion Week. The mystery woman behind Paris's power brand. Interviews poured in. I declined most. When they asked about my past, I said, I design for women who've survived worse than gossip. They ate it up. On day 4, I saw him. Ethan. He was speaking at a TechX fashion panel downtown, promoting a new startup that partnered with influencers to design capsule collections. The kind of shallow, fast profit idea he'd always loved. I sat in the back, hair tied up, red lipstick perfectly cruel. He didn't notice me, yet. But I noticed everything. He was older now. Slicker. Still handsome, still well-dressed, but the cracks were there. A flicker of stress in the corners of his eyes. A pause too long when an audience member asked about creative integrity. And beside him, clinging to his arm like she belonged there, was a woman I knew. Giselle. One of the girls who helped spread the rumors back then. She used to model. Now she was chief brand curator for his company. How fitting. 2 snakes building a nest together. I could have said something. Could have walked up, smiled, let them see what I'd become. But power isn't in the reveal. Power is in the wait. So I left before the panel ended. I had a show to finish. On the final day before Fashion Week, I stood in the center of the studio and stared at the lineup of models in my collection. All of them strong. Diverse. Powerful. None of them famous, yet. I didn't want fame. I wanted impact. The kind you feel in your chest like thunder. I walked down the line, adjusting sleeves, smoothing fabric, whispering what each piece meant. This one is about betrayal, I told one model. Wear it like you're daring someone to lie to you again. She nodded, eyes gleaming. My assistant, Jules, approached with a phone in hand. You have a request, he said. A man from Apex PR says he wants to send a VIP guest to your show. He's dating someone from the media and Ethan Hale, I interrupted. Jules blinked. You know him? I smiled. Tell them 2 seats. Front row. Put them right where the cameras can see their reactions. You're sure? I insist. Ethan thought he ended me at an engagement party in front of a crowd. Let's see how he handles watching me rise in silence, in the very city that helped destroy me. Because this time, I control the narrative. This time, the spotlight is mine. And when the curtains rise tomorrow, the last person anyone expects to walk that runway will be the woman they once laughed at. I hope he's watching. I hope they all are. The day of the show arrived cloaked in gray skies and freezing wind, the kind of weather that makes you brace your shoulders and keep your head down. But I walked into the venue with my chin high. The space was a renovated industrial warehouse in the meatpacking district, raw concrete, high ceilings, iron beams. Cold. Brutal. Perfect. My team transformed it overnight. Clean white floors. Minimalist spotlights. Every chair placed with mathematical precision. And at the end of the runway, a single mirrored wall that stretched floor to ceiling. The audience would see themselves as the models passed. A reminder. Fashion isn't about fantasy. It's a reflection. The front row filled fast, buyers, editors, influencers, all trying to guess who Mira Lane really was. They threw out wild theories. Some thought I was a French duchess. Others claimed I was the secret daughter of a disgraced fashion mogul. A few even whispered that I might be AI. I let them guess. It was better that way. Let the mystery speak louder than the truth. Then I saw them. Ethan and Giselle. Arriving late, of course. He wore navy and arrogance. She wore one of her own company's designs, cheap fabric disguised with sequins. They sat exactly where I told Jules to place them. Center front. Just 3 seats from Claudine. I wondered if Ethan recognized her. Probably not. He never paid attention to people who weren't useful to him. That was always his weakness. The show began. Music low and slow, building like a storm. One by one, the models emerged. Tall. Sharp. Unapologetic. The crowd went silent. You could feel it in the air, the shift. This wasn't a show. It was a reckoning. The clothes weren't loud. They didn't scream for attention. They whispered. Threatened. Promised. I watched Ethan as he leaned forward, frowning, trying to understand what he was looking at. I could see it all over his face. The clothes were familiar. The cuts. The structure. The essence. And then the model in the fall stepped out, long black coat with a slash of red silk underneath, identical to the one I wore when he left me standing alone at the press conference. His eyes widened. Giselle leaned in, said something. He didn't answer. I waited. Saved the resurrection for last. The lights dimmed, and then I stepped onto the runway. Gasps echoed across the room. I didn't need to look to know the cameras were flashing. I didn't need to hear to know the whispers had begun. I walked slowly. Deliberately. In that crimson gown, every step a statement. My face fully visible. My posture unshakable. I locked eyes with Ethan halfway down the runway. And in that single second, I saw the recognition dawn. His mouth opened slightly. I didn't blink. Didn't falter. Just kept walking. Past him. Past the press. Past the past. When I reached the mirrored wall at the end of the runway, I turned and looked at myself. Not the girl who was left humiliated. Not the designer who lost everything. But the woman who built something bigger. Meaner. Unbreakable. The applause erupted. Standing ovation. Not a polite one. A real one. The kind that shakes the walls and leaves editors scrambling to rewrite their reviews. I stepped off the runway and didn't wait for anyone. My team knew the drill. Celebrate later. For now, disappear. I exited through the back, took the black car waiting outside, and let the door shut behind me like a seal on the past. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. Unknown number. Then another. Then a message, "Is this really you?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Let him spiral. Let him replay every decision he made in the last 5 years and realize where it led him. To a folding chair in a warehouse, watching the woman he discarded become untouchable. The reviews hit the next morning. Lane's American debut redefines power dressing. The finale model's identity confirmed as Mira Lane herself, shocking reveal goes viral. Who is Mira Lane? A name everyone thought was new. A face that looked almost familiar. I booked no interviews. Released no statements. The silence spoke louder than any headline. Ethan tried again. Sent flowers to the showroom. Had his PR team reach out for a collaboration. I sent the bouquet back with a note that said, "This isn't charity season." The city that once watched me fall now plastered my name on every screen. And Ethan Hale? He'd become a footnote in my story. A whisper behind the roar. The only thing louder than a scandal is a comeback. And I had only just begun. By the end of Fashion Week, the name Mira Lane wasn't just trending, it was canon. Editors called the collection a soft war cry. Celebrities scrambled to get on waiting lists for the crimson gown. Vogue emailed 5 times. The Met Gala sent a preliminary invite. And Ethan? Ethan started showing up everywhere I was. I saw him at gallery openings he never would have attended before. At tech mixers he used to mock. He lingered near panels I sat on, offered tight-lipped smiles like we shared some harmless history. But he didn't speak to me directly. Not yet. Maybe he was still trying to be clever. Or maybe he was afraid of what I'd say if he gave me the chance. So I gave him none. I walked past him like he was a mannequin. It drove him mad. I could tell. People like Ethan didn't know how to handle being ignored. They fed off reactions, fury, heartbreak, even contempt. But silence? That was starvation. Jules noticed it too. "He's circling," he said one evening as we left a press dinner. "Like a vulture." "Good," I replied. "That means he knows something's dying." What was dying was his leverage. His company, once shiny, loud, all hype, was leaking money. The capsule collections weren't selling. The influencers he banked on had moved on. And investors were getting nervous. I knew this because I'd already spoken to two of them. Quietly. Casually. Over wine and art and off-the-record conversations. I didn't promise anything. Just listened. Let them ask about expansion. About strategy. About who I was behind the name. I gave them just enough to want more. Ethan's name came up often. Along with doubts. Along with the question no one dared say aloud, was he still the right face for the future? And I was the mystery everyone wanted to understand. The woman who appeared from nowhere, walked a runway in a murder-red gown, and vanished again. They asked me why I didn't give interviews. I said, why ruin a good silhouette with too much detail? They laughed. They wanted in. Even Claudine, who'd once warned me never to mix revenge with business, smiled quietly as the offers piled in. "You're doing it your way," she said. "Just don't let the fire burn the house you built." "I'm not burning the house," I told her. "I'm replacing the architect." The moment Ethan finally broke came a week later, at an exclusive after-party for a magazine's power issue. I wore a black jumpsuit cut to kill, and heels that made every step sound like a gavel. Ethan was already there when I arrived. Standing by the bar, drink in hand, Giselle at his side. Her smile faltered the second she saw me. His did something worse, it curved. "Mira," he said, stepping forward. "Or should I say?" "Don't," I cut in. "You'll only embarrass yourself further." He stopped. Smiled tighter. "You look different. That's what happens when you stop being someone's doormat." "I didn't recognize you at first," he said, voice smooth. "But now I can't stop seeing it." "Good. It means you're finally looking at me. You've done well for yourself. Better than you expected?" "Better than anyone expected." He studied me, something twitching in his jaw. "So, what happens now?" "You've won. You're on every billboard. Everyone wants a piece of you. Is this the part where you rub it in?" I stepped closer. Close enough for him to smell the rose and smoke in my perfume. "This isn't about rubbing it in. This is about letting you watch." "That's worse, isn't it?" Giselle reached for his arm. "Come on, Ethan." But he didn't move. He looked at me like he didn't know whether to apologize or beg. And then he said, "I made a mistake." I laughed. Quiet. Cruel. "No. You made a decision. And I made a legacy." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, surrounded by power, drowning in regret. That night, I signed a deal with one of his top investors. And the next morning, I released a press statement. Lane would be expanding. A new division. Ready to wear. Affordable luxury. Accessible. Scalable. Game-changing. Ethan's company had planned to do the same. Only now, I'd done it faster. Better. And with all his resources suddenly unsure whose side they were on. I didn't need to destroy him. He was doing it himself. All I did was light the runway. And let him see the reflection of what he lost. By spring, the city belonged to me. My name floated on the lips of people who'd once rolled their eyes when I walked into a room. Industry execs started referencing me in boardrooms. Stylists whispered that I was the future of quiet dominance. And Ethan? Ethan was unraveling, just slow enough that only people like me could see it. His smile was still polished. His clothes still pressed. But the glow was gone. The sheen of invincibility that once followed him into every room had dimmed. I knew because he stopped walking with his shoulders back. He started checking who was behind him. The powerful never do that, unless they feel a shift. And the shift had come. I was expanding fast. The new Lane ready-to-wear line sold out before production finished. Pre-orders were 6 figures deep. We opened our first US flagship in Manhattan, and I made sure it stood directly across from one of Ethan's underperforming concept stores. The press called it bold. I called it poetic. During the launch event, I wore a white suit, something I never used to wear. The same color as the dress I wore to our engagement party. Except now, the fabric was sharper. The cut unforgiving. The statement clear. I had reclaimed the color he tried to stain. He didn't come to the launch. But he sent a gift. A handwritten note tucked inside a box of vintage champagne. It read, "You win. Let's talk?" I didn't reply. Instead, I posted a photo of the unopened box on my story with a caption that simply said, "Some things age well. Regret isn't one of them." It went viral in under 10 minutes. People dissected it. Influencers praised it. PR teams scrambled to mimic it. Ethan stayed quiet after that. I assumed he'd gotten the message. But men like him don't vanish. They recalculate. And 2 weeks later, his next move landed with a thud. One of my junior designers came to me in tears. Ethan had offered her a position, twice the salary, her own studio, full creative control. I said no, she told me. I just thought you should know. I wasn't angry. I was impressed. The offer meant he was desperate. Poaching from me wasn't just a move. It was a cry. He was trying to rebuild by stealing the very foundation of what broke him. But I wasn't playing defense. I was already 10 steps ahead. While he was busy chasing ghosts of my brand, I'd started talks with one of the most exclusive fashion tech platforms in Asia. They wanted a joint line. I offered them something better, equity. Within days, we had a partnership locked. And a clause in the deal gave me influence over which North American collaborators they'd blacklist. I didn't name names. But the lawyers knew. That same week, a rumor spread that Ethan's latest investor had pulled out. Then another. Then 2 of his board members resigned. I didn't celebrate. I just kept moving. Revenge wasn't about gloating. It was about rising so far above that the ones who tried to break you couldn't even see you clearly anymore. But fate has a sense of humor. One night, I walked into a restaurant for a quiet meeting with Claudine and found Ethan sitting alone at the bar. He looked up. We locked eyes. I should have walked past. I meant to. But something in me paused. Maybe I wanted to see how far he'd fallen. Maybe I just wanted to watch him squirm. "You're not ordering that," I said, nodding to the bottle in front of him. "It's overpriced. They chill it too long." "Still the expert," he said quietly. "Still the liar," I replied. "Why are you really here?" "You already know." "Say it." He stared down into his glass. "Because I made a mistake." "No," I said. "Because you underestimated me. You've changed." "I had to." He leaned in slightly, voice low. "And if I said I missed the girl you used to be? I'd say she died the night you tried to bury her. Lucky for me, she left a will." He blinked. "And what did it say?" "That I'd come back with everything you thought you took. And more." I stood up. Tossed a few bills on the counter. "Don't try to follow. You're not built for the path I took." I left him there, watching me walk away again. But this time, I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even angry. I was done. Ethan Hale was a chapter. Not a villain. Not a ghost. Just a cautionary tale I'd written out of my own story. And the woman walking out of that restaurant? She didn't belong to him anymore. She belonged to herself. The day Ethan Hale's company folded, I was in Milan. I was sketching a new line by the balcony of my hotel suite when the alert came in: Apex Fashion Group declares bankruptcy after investor pullout. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply turned the page in my sketchbook and began a new design. The collapse wasn't a surprise. It had been coming for weeks. Stores closed quietly. Payments delayed. Influencers stopped tagging them. But it wasn't until the board released the statement, citing irreconcilable financial damage and loss of public trust, that the world knew what I already did. Ethan was finished. Publicly. Permanently. The man who once stood beside me in tailored suits and whispered power into my ear now sat beneath headlines that described him as reckless, outdated, and unprepared for the modern industry. People who once toasted his name now avoided it like it was contagious. His fall was complete. But I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't reference it in interviews or feed it to tabloids. Because real revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's clean. And it doesn't demand applause. Still, I couldn't ignore what came next. A week after the announcement, Jules knocked lightly on my door. "You should see this," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. It was an email. From Ethan. Subject line, "One last meeting." I didn't open it right away. Instead, I looked out at the Milan skyline, at the city I once dreamed of visiting back when I was nothing more than a name discarded by a man who thought he'd never see me again. I waited until midnight. Then I opened it. The message was short. No begging. No blame. Just one sentence. "If you ever want to see what's left of the person you knew, meet me at the rooftop bar, Saturday, 8 p.m. I almost deleted it. Almost. But curiosity has always been my flaw. So I went. Not in designer armor. Not in crimson or white. I wore black. Simple, sharp, and clean. Hair up. Face bare. Nothing for him to read. Nothing for him to use. The rooftop bar was mostly empty. Windy. Quiet. He was already there, seated in the far corner with 2 glasses of something untouched between us. He stood when I approached. But I didn't offer a greeting. I sat. Waited. He looked thinner. Sharper, but not in the way people admired. More like something chipped at the edges. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Don't thank me. Just talk." He exhaled slowly. I wanted to explain. I tilted my head. "You think I need that?" "No. I think I do." He paused. When I ended the engagement, it wasn't about money. Or image. It was fear. You were rising. Fast. And he stopped himself. I'd never been with someone who didn't need me more than I needed them. And that scared me. I said nothing. He kept going. "Giselle told me lies. Said you were using me. That you'd laughed about it." I believed her. Not because it made sense. But because it gave me an excuse to run. "You didn't run," I said. "You destroyed me. Publicly." "I know." He looked away. And now I know what that kind of fall feels like. I studied him. The man who once lit up rooms now flickered like a dying bulb. "You didn't ask me here to apologize," I said. "You asked me here to feel seen." His eyes met mine. "I just wanted to be honest with the one person I didn't deserve honesty from." I stood. "You think this makes us even?" "No," he said. "I think it makes me human." Finally. I left without finishing the drink. Without giving him absolution. Because some stories don't need tidy endings. They need closure. And this? This was mine. I didn't need Ethan Hale to suffer. I needed him to know he'd underestimated the wrong woman. And he did. Every empire he built had crumbled. But mine? Mine was still rising. Still growing. Still untouchable. As I descended in the glass elevator, the city lights reflected against the steel like stars. I saw my face in the mirrored panel, harder now, yes. But clearer. Stronger. I wasn't the girl in the lace dress anymore. I wasn't the woman left behind. I was Mira Lane. And I had everything he thought I'd never build without him. Only now, I had one last thing to decide, what to do with the power I'd earned. And who I might become next. When I returned to New York, the city felt different. Or maybe I did. I walked through the revolving doors of the new Lane headquarters, a minimalist tower in Tribeca, filled with glass, steel, and the quiet hum of power. It had taken 5 years to get here. 5 years to rise from the ashes of public betrayal, to rebuild a name, a brand, a legacy. And yet, standing at the top floor, staring down at the city that once swallowed me whole, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt ready. The fashion world was shifting again. My competitors were scrambling to imitate what we'd already evolved past. I was in talks for a global licensing deal. Hollywood stylists fought over my newest line. And the Met Gala had requested I co-chair next year's theme. But all of it, every offer, every headline, every whispered compliment, was just noise compared to what mattered. Control. For the first time in my life, I held all of it. And not just in fashion. Behind the scenes, I'd quietly become a silent partner in 2 media companies, an investor in a materials lab designing sustainable textiles, and a board member on a startup that would render Ethan's failed influencer model obsolete. I didn't need to scream my victories. They lived in boardrooms now. In silent handshakes and sealed contracts. In rooms Ethan Hale would never be invited into again. Still, his name resurfaced. People asked what had happened to him. Why he'd disappeared. A few even suggested we'd once been involved. Just a rumor, I'd say, smiling. I've never been one for reckless men. But in private, I watched. I saw that he'd taken a job in consulting. That he'd launched a modest podcast about entrepreneurship, barely pulling in a few thousand views. That he was dating someone new, an art dealer, quiet, kind-eyed. Maybe that was what he needed now. Maybe he'd finally learned what it meant to stand beside someone instead of over them. Either way, I felt nothing. Not hate. Not revenge. Just distance. One evening, as I prepped for an event at the Lincoln Center, Jules entered my dressing suite holding an envelope. No return address, he said, setting it down. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. A candid shot from that final runway show. Me, walking in the crimson gown, eyes forward, unflinching. On the back, in faint pen, was written, "I see you now." There was no name. No signature. But I knew. And still, I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to be seen anymore. I'd spent too long chasing that. Now, I lived in a world that revolved around what I built with my own hands. And as I stepped onto the stage that night, greeted by thunderous applause, cameras flashing like lightning, I knew this was the story that mattered. Not the betrayal. Not the heartbreak. Not even the revenge. The real story was this: the woman they thought would crumble became the foundation they now stood on. I wasn't anyone's cautionary tale. I was the blueprint. And every step I took from here on out? That was legacy in motion. The Lane Legacy Gala was the final thread. A celebration of the brand, yes, but more than that, it was the first time every name that had once dismissed, mocked, or erased me was invited into a room they never thought I'd own. I stood at the top of the grand staircase inside the restored Lyric Hall, the venue I chose not for its history but for its irony. It had hosted my engagement party once. The same hall where Ethan had humiliated me beneath a crystal chandelier. That chandelier now sparkled over my name in gold lettering. The House of Lane, a celebration of power and design. The guests arrived in waves. Designers, editors, celebrities, investors. Champagne flowed. Cameras flashed. And my name, was printed on every wall, every invitation, every whispered compliment. Not once did it say who I used to be. It didn't have to. Ethan wasn't invited. Officially. But I knew he would come. He couldn't resist endings. Especially ones he thought he could still rewrite. And right on cue, just as the orchestra slowed into its final piece before the awards began, I saw him. Dressed well. Alone. Quiet. He walked past rows of people who didn't recognize him anymore. People who had shifted their loyalty, their memory, to me. He waited until the event began to approach. Until I was alone on the balcony, overlooking a sea of people who had once doubted me and now clung to my every move. "You made it," I said without turning. "You knew I would," he replied, his voice softer than I remembered. "Why are you here, Ethan?" "Because I needed to see it. All of it. What you built. Who you became. I needed to witness it in person. And now that you have?" I finally looked at him. He wasn't broken. But he wasn't the man who left me either. There was something humbled in him now. Something quiet. "I don't regret your success," he said. "But I regret not knowing what I had in front of me." "You didn't just lose me," I said. "You lost the future I was building, for both of us. And you built it anyway." "I did." He looked down. "Do you ever think about what it would have been like, if I hadn't walked away?" "I don't need to," I said. "Because if you hadn't walked away, I would have never run this far." A silence passed between us. Heavy. Final. "I wanted to say goodbye," he said, after a moment. "Not just to you. To the part of me that thought I always had to win to matter." "Then do it," I said. "And don't look back." He nodded once. And then he left. Just like that. No drama. No scene. Just a man who once had power realizing it was never really his. I watched him disappear into the crowd. No one stopped him. No one followed. And in that moment, I knew the revenge was complete. Because the real victory wasn't in making him suffer. It was in watching him become irrelevant. Down below, the orchestra swelled. My name was announced for the final speech. I descended the stairs slowly, every click of my heel a reminder of how far I'd come. The spotlight hit me as I stepped onto the stage. I took the mic. The room hushed. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I looked at them all, the critics, the allies, the quiet watchers, and said only this: they tried to make me forget who I was. So I became someone they'd never forget. The applause didn't just fill the room. It echoed through every hallway, every memory, every scar. I smiled. And for the first time in years, it wasn't armor. It was peace. My story didn't end in lace and shame. It began there. But it ended in silk and steel. And from that night forward, the world would remember me not as the girl he left, but as the woman who never looked back.